Welcome, everyone. We have a little extra bonus content for the Bogey Proof listeners. We got Matt and Mike here doing a deep dive on Tiger, the documentary of Tiger Woods, the greatest golfer of all time, um, and some of the crazy shit that he's been through um, over the 45 years of his life. Is he 45 years old? Is that correct?
Might be 44, but yeah, I think he just had a birthday, so it's pretty close. I'll tell you
Yeah,
right.
yeah. But we're excited to dive into this. I think we thought there's some good stuff about it, a lot of not so great things about the documentary. Um, but just looking forward to kind of diving a little bit deeper and hearing some of your insights over at Matt. I watched it 2 hours straight through. It was two parts. I know you watched it separately.
Mhm.
Um, could you give the listeners a little bit of insight into kind of what part one was and what part two was and kind of the overarching theme?
Yeah, so I guess first of all, Tiger's 45. You're right there. And then to get into the doc here, so part one, part two. Part one was really kind of setting up who Tiger is, kind of his upbringing, a little pretty brief background on his parents. I mean, they talked a lot about his parents and how they raised Tiger and the different things he was exposed to, the different things he experienced as a 4-year old being on like TV shows and shit like that. They do a really good job of kind of laying out all those different things that Tiger the kind of the environment that Tiger came up in, right? Like the really unique and interesting one being, obviously who he is and stuff like that. So they do a really good job at giving some background to there as unless you're a really avid golfer, big Tiger fan like myself, I mean, you probably don't know that kind of stuff. So they do a good job at setting the scene with how he was kind of brought up. And then from there, they kind of transition to as he gets a little older in the high school and college years, his family life, how he, went through high school, the people he interacted with, kind of what he was interested in, like how him and his father's relationship grew through the years and kind of stuff like that. And then as they I think they get into a little bit of the like successful early years of his golf game too in that then they kind of lead everything up to the 2009 scandal and kind of when things kind of took a turn for the worse for Tiger personally and a little bit professionally, obviously with the loss of all the sponsorships and stuff that came with that in 2009. And that's really where part two kicks off, is really gets right into that scandal. um Kind of the comeback from that scandal, not a full comeback like you would from a golf perspective. He did get back to playing on the PGA Tour, but obviously the comeback was more his personal life and kind of putting all that back together. And then, then they lead into the health issues in 2015 with his body just really completely failing him. Really no other way to put it, but his body failing him and all the back issues and the constant pain and discomfort he was in that ultimately led to all the surgeries, which led to the prescription drugs, which led to the DUI in 2017. And then, all of that coming back full circle to the 2018 Tour Championship and, briefly getting into the Masters. So that's really kind of the timeline they went through here. I'm sure there's some pieces I'm missing there, but if you're really looking to learn about the Tiger Woods story, there's the book Tiger Woods written by Army Katay, and I think somebody else co-wrote it with him. So apologies to that guy if I'm, forgetting your name, but they kind of lay out all the stuff that gets hit on in this documentary, and obviously in a little bit more detail because they had, a full book to write about it, not just a two-part documentary to cram it all into. So, going from that timeline, Mike, what were some of your favorite parts? And if you have one from part one and part two, or just, one main point you want to get across, what were your kind of favorite parts of it?
Yeah, and I thought the documentary was interesting. For someone who watches a lot of golf and knows Tiger Woods' story relatively well. I didn't think it was like crazy insightful. I didn't learn a whole lot from it, but definitely wouldn't have, given back the 2 hours that I spent to watch the two parts. I thought it was definitely enjoyable enough to sit down and consume that piece. So for anyone listening to this, if you haven't watched it or read the book, I would say go do both of those things. I think it's a useful um, go spend the time and do it. I think Tiger Woods is such an interesting person, and to learn a little bit more about someone who's been so successful in playing a sport and doing those things, is always a good use of your time. But I would say overall, I just thought the most interesting and kind of my favorite piece of the entire thing was just the relationship that they kind of showed between Earl, his father, and Tiger. I think it was very interesting because they talk about all the great things, and they were best friends, and they said that a lot within the documentary. Tiger Woods and his dad are best friends. Both Earl said that and Tiger said that, and they made that very clear. But then it also dives into a lot of the shitty things that Earl did, um, as a father, but then also just as a person. Extramarital affairs, and really leading Tiger into a place where he couldn't live his own life. Especially in part one, they talk a lot about how controlling, his parents are of him, and kind of the thing where they don't really allow him to live his life. He's kind of just living their dream almost. And
Yeah.
Earl talks a lot through the documentary about kind of, this is the plan, this is the process. Like
Yeah.
this was always kind of the game plan for Tiger. Um, so I thought kind of the place that they put Earl and Tiger's relationship was an interesting kind of juxtaposition, because a lot of times I think in movies we expect filmmakers to pick a side because they're really trying to promote one side or the other. But kind of because it's a documentary, it was a case of, let's put all the facts out there and kind of let the consumer make a decision. And I don't know, right? Like I
Yeah.
don't know what to think. I don't know what my final conclusion over is. Do I feel like the things that Earl did for Tiger, like all the great things that allowed him to be successful and this great golfer, and allowed him to put him in a position to be as philanthropic as he was and change as many lives as he has, like, do those outweigh the things that he did that like fucked up Tiger in the head, that
Yeah.
probably led to a lot of the things that Tiger did later in life? um I don't know. So I think that's kind of an ever evolving theory, and we won't really know until we see Tiger's full story, right? Like, we saw the last 45 years or so of Earl's life as Tiger kind of was in the spotlight, and saw what he was all about. But until we see kind of Tiger's entire life and all the things that he does in this world, we won't truly know how Earl affected him and kind of the end game on that. So I think this is kind of an ever evolving theory, and definitely something I'm going to think a little bit more about when I see Tiger do something, and the way he operates, and the action he chooses to take. I'm going to think, how did his parents influence him, and how did the things that Earl did, or the things that Earl said, affect how he operates today. So I thought that was an interesting way that they kind of laid out their relationship.
Yeah, that was I totally agree. I think the only thing I wanted to know a little bit more of, and this is nitpicking because I think they did do a really good job with the whole Earl Tiger dynamic, showing both sides. And like you said, if he's not I mean, let's just be frank, he was an asshole. As you know, like as a dad, as a golf coach, he was amazing, and he created the perfect golfer for 20 years or so. But was that worth it? Is something I don't think anybody can answer besides Tiger, and I don't think he ever will either. Um, would he trade? It's like, would he trade having a more healthy relationship with his dad, or even his dad raising him to be a better man versus a golfer, with like you talk about the extramarital affairs and stuff like that? Would he trade one to have less wins on the tour and be less of the killer he was and stuff like that? Like, that's kind of the juxtaposition of, like, okay, they both definitely played a role, and like, the way he was brought up led to both the incredible golf and also the shitty human decisions he made, or like, as a personal decisions he made. So it's like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. It's like, you have to give up one to do better in the other, kind of thing. Like, that whole dynamic has to change. And the question of whether or not that was worth it, like the golf, and like I said, all the opportunities gotten through golf to impact not only his own life and his family's life, but a lot of other people's. Tiger does a lot of really good work with foundations, and he has his own, and charitable kind of activities and whatnot. So it's like, is that stuff worth the pain he caused for Elin, and the awkward conversations he's gonna have to have with his kids, probably about now. They're getting of age now where they understand what happened now, and it's like, that's not ideal. So it's like, and I think that's going to be the everlong question when it comes to Tiger and his his whole life and career, and what he looks back on is, where do you draw the line of what was worth it versus what wasn't, and kind of the way he with everything that happened in that really like that 6-7 year window from 2009 to the DUI in 2017, he had a couple good years in between there on the golf course. And you don't really know how personally well he was doing during that time with everything that was swirling around him with his health and coming off of that kind of an opening scandal that really just exposes your entire family. But yeah, I don't think we'll ever get that answer. And, it's up for debate. And I think that's what this documentary did a really good job of doing, of just laying out the facts and being like, this is it. This is what this kid was brought up in and was raised as, and kind of the path he was really given, not really chosen. He was always, like you said, it was always the plan, the process, the plan, the process. I just would have liked, and like the Tiger's kindergarten teacher coming on there in the very beginning of part one, I thought was pretty funny. Her being like, Earl was an asshole. Nobody liked him when he came into school. Like, he never let Tiger do anything but golf, like whatever. This little 80-year-old lady just getting like all feisty at Earl was. I thought was pretty funny. But yeah, I just would have liked a little more of like, and this is just me, the golf side of it, but like, what did Earl do that he was able to create Tiger, right? From a golfing perspective, like, who the hell is he to be that good of a teacher? I know Tiger eventually worked a lot with the Navy Course Pro and stuff like that, but like, all you ever see is Earl on the golf course with Tiger for the first 15 years of his life, it looks like. So, what is Earl's background in golf besides just playing at the Navy golf course and being a Green Beret and all this stuff? I mean, the mental side makes sense being a Green Beret, but the golf fundamentals and mechanics and all that stuff he instilled in Tiger, like, who is he to be that good at it? Like, it clearly worked. I'm not saying it was wrong, but like, I would have liked to know a little bit more about his golf background that allowed him to kind of create Tiger for what he was. But other than that, I think that was a really good part. My personal favorite part outside of that was getting Tiger's high school / college girlfriend in to do some interviews and stuff for the documentary. I mean, if you read the book, you kind of got some insight, and I think I mentioned it on last week's pod of kind of the relationship Tiger had with her. But I was really surprised and like enjoyed seeing Tiger, some of the home videos she had of her and Tiger hanging out, and like that him dancing around her living room and being goofy for the prom pictures. And just, you never see Tiger Woods and think, oh, he's such a goofball funny guy, like, but that's what he was when he was with her. And like, it's like really wild to see that side of him when all you've ever seen, obviously through golf and even in his personal life, is either really bad personal shit or an absolute machine, like murderer on the golf course, like stone cold killer, like nothing about it. And then you see him dancing around, playing a fake saxophone, rolling around on the ground, and like just doing all that goofy stuff. And that was really wild to see how he had that in him. And then he was doing that while he was playing good golf too. He was winning US Ams at this point, and then all of a sudden it's gone. And I think that goes to his upbringing. And like I mentioned in one of our Bogey Proof episodes, I think it was episode 8, of like Earl and Tita like basically told her like to get out of here, and like Tiger wrote her a note or something that said like, this isn't good for me and my thing, like you're taking advantage of me or something like that. And she, to this day, and she alludes to in the doc, is like, I don't think he wrote that. I think they wrote it or like made him write that, coerced him, whatever you want to say. And based on the way they lay everything out, I kind of believe it. I don't, based on the videos you see when he's with her, to then just be like, get the hell out of my life, like that makes no sense. So I think that just shows the way that they manipulated him and made him, like, dehumanized him and just made him a machine, a golf robot, golf machine, whatever you want to call it, that led to his golf success. But I think the documentary does a good job of kind of putting all that together in part one and just being like, this is how he was raised. He was the chosen one, like all these different things, like you said, like that just was his path. He had no chance to do anything but that.
Yeah, no, I really like that piece too. I thought gave us a little bit of insight into like who Tiger was, without his parents involved. And I think
Yeah.
it's interesting because we see that, right? We see this in this documentary kind of very early in life, and then it kind of stops abruptly. And I feel like maybe we're starting to enter into the back end of Tiger's life where we see this as his high school girlfriend calls it, kind of sweetness and like
Yeah.
goofiness. Like, I think we're starting to see that in Tiger as he raises his kids. So I think it's not on the same level and right in there in the public eye. So really not an opportunity for him to like really show that side completely. But I think in the PNC we saw it a little bit, just like the sheer joy, and kind of benevolence that like he just has at like all like watching his son compete and watching just like them have that opportunity and that experience together. I think it's interesting, and it's kind of cliche and to say, but like I felt like he probably like smiled a little bit the same way that he did in like that old home video footage.
Right.
So I think, and Tiger Woods is known for like being this guy that like smiles really big, and he's got these big teeth and right, like, and that's just a part of who he is. But it's a little different, and who knows, maybe like for a 20-year period that was a fake smile, right? Like he was
I
he
think
was
they
just
shed
kind of
light on that
operating.
too, right? When like that video that Joey sent us that was clipped from the doc, when he's literally holding the claret jug at St. Andrews and he's just like, fuck me, like looking around at the crowd and all the people in the media. He's just like, you can tell, like, then they do kind of show it, especially in like the mid 2000s, like 2003 to 2009, the scandal. You can see the media and all of it, and his personal stuff, the stuff weighing on him, and you see his demeanor when he's not literally on the golf course and like doing his robot stuff. You can just see his demeanor really fades off and becomes like, he just looks heavy, right? He's just like, fuck everything. Like, I'm so sick of all this shit. Like, I think they even allude to it in some of the interviews they show him. They're like, do you ever get used to it? He's like, nobody can get used to this shit. This sucks. Like they kind of got some candid comments in there that he probably, would have rather not been caught on tape, but they were. Stuff like that I think really shows, like you said, like that smile for 15 years was probably fake, or at least partially fake.
Yeah, no, and I think it's funny too. It was really odd. They didn't show him on a ton of like, there wasn't like put him on like a lot of TV shows or anything, but they showed 2 Oprah episodes, which I thought was like very odd. I don't know if Oprah, gave him $1 million
HBO.
and said,
In there.
reincarnate my career or something. I don't know. Maybe she did that, but, and just like he said a couple of things on that, like, hey, I still don't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of his way of, and they talk a lot throughout the documentary of like Tiger kind of just being immature, because he never really had the opportunity to like live his own life or mature in a way that most people do.
You're a camera from like age 4. Everything was documented. So you never got to like fuck up by, in private and like, go through that process of like kind of growing up. Like you said, like you never got to do that. He just always golfed and was always under a camera.
At 20 and, in his mid 20s, after he's had this tremendous amount of success, he's still figuring out how to articulate like, hand up, I'm drowning. Right. And I think that's something that you learn early in your career or in college or something, saying you put your hand up and you ask for help and you figure out how to move forward. And for him, I don't know if it was the fact that he had, so much success early on, or that Earl was kind of always there to, shepherd him along, but I think he never really learned how to do that. So he was kind of always drowning in his own success and his own fame and all those things. That's probably what made him great, is that like he was able to shut it off from the world and just move forward and, just be an epic individual and just overall. But I think that was also interesting. I thought a couple of those clips were Tiger kind of calling out for help. And I think him not receiving that help could be a lot of the reason as to why a little bit later in his life, in his 30s, a lot of these things happened to him, because he just didn't learn how to deal with it, and he didn't put the support system around him to be successful. I think that was kind of also an interesting piece. Stevie Williams was on there a bunch, and they had his friend, I can't remember her name, but like just the idea of like being able to just like shut people off, and same with the high school girlfriend, like never talk to him again. And like, I think that just shows you maybe a lack of maturity as far as how he deals with relationships in general. So another interesting piece that you don't really think about until, these people put it on the TV screen and you hear
Right.
about it, and now your brain's going in 4 million directions trying to figure out someone who's, you know, kind of befuddled the world for all this time. So
Mhm. Yeah, I thought that's a good point too. Like the Stevie thing, like Tiger was Stevie's best man at his wedding, and then when he dropped him as a caddy, he never talked to him again. Like, and he dropped him as a caddy after he already told him, "Go ahead and caddy for Adam Scott. I don't care." But then his people were like, "No, no, no, you can't caddy for Adam Scott. Like you're Tiger brand, blah 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 blah." And they was like, "All right, yeah, see ya." And then like I think, like you said, that Tiger was always told who to be friends with growing up. You know, like he never had to like form real relationships or end real relationships. He never had to end a relationship unless it was ended for him, whether it was via his parents, via his people around him, via his own doing and the scandal breaking out and him having to stop talking to like Rachel and all those other girls and stuff like that. Like it always ended via not his own decisions. So he never had to like learn how to like break off a relationship or take a step back in a relationship, whatever you want to call it. Like he never had to do that himself. People, it was always just basically done through his actions or other people's telling him, no, this is what you need to do. This is what's best for you. He never had to do that himself. Like I guess we can get like more into the second part, like the Rachel, I forget her last name, like
Yucatan or something like
yeah,
that.
something weird
Yeah.
starts with a U,
Yeah.
but she even like the stuff that she's saying, like that alludes to like what you're saying. He never like he couldn't sleep. He took Ambien or he needed her. Like he never knew how to express himself. He didn't talk about anything unless he talked with her. So like because of the way his his emotional or whatever maturity you want to call it, like it wasn't there. But for whatever reason, he found some sort of safe haven with her versus his wife and kids and all that other stuff where it was somewhat of an escape for him. It seemed like, but like because he wasn't allowed to have any of that growing up. Like I don't know. It makes sense why he did what he did. I don't know. I don't know how to like articulate that myself, but like he found something with her or whatever that like made him feel comfortable where he probably has never felt comfortable at that level ever. And I think she like says that that's what he told her and stuff like that going through that. But it's like, yeah, like he never had a normal emotional relationship his whole life. He didn't know, didn't have a chance to. The one he almost had with his girlfriend, and I don't even, they don't even mention a single friend, right? In the whole documentary. Like outside of like, and they kind of label some of like I think it was Marco Mira's daughter or niece or something like that. Like she gets thrown in there, it's just labeled Tiger's friend. That's another thing about the doc that like drove me nuts. Like I know who Stevie Williams is, and like you could put they like labeled the other guy as like the pro at the Navy course, whatever. But like the people they brought on, they didn't tell the story of how they knew Tiger unless it came up in their interview. Like they didn't like obviously Stevie Williams, like that one's pretty obvious. He was his caddy for so many years and whatever. And the Navy Pro, whatever, Navy Course Pro guy, he talks about his relationship, but like some of the other people, like, oh yeah, I was close with Tiger, but like, what does that mean? Like, did you work for him? Were you family friends with him? Like, I don't know. Did you babysit his kids? Like, I don't know. They never really got into that for me on a lot of the people, especially in the second part, where all these people are coming from the woodwork about the scandal and his actions and how he handled them, his drug addiction, whatever. There's a label it like, oh, Tiger's friend, or so and so from whatever. I don't know. I didn't like that part about the doc of like they just didn't explain that enough to give people the like to validate the takes that those people had. I could only take them with a grain of salt because I was like, how did you get that information? They don't even talk about it, They just are like, yeah, I remember seeing Tiger sometimes he'd just be really sad. It's like, okay, like where, how, like what, like who are you to know what he was feeling like? It's just really weird. I found that to be like kind of I don't know if it's like it's not really a miss, but like, and that's probably just the fact that they can only do 2 episodes, and they don't have time to build a full character background of everybody they put in there. But some of the people are just like, who even are you again? Like, why? What are you talking about? Like, I just couldn't really, validate what they were saying. I don't know. I felt that was kind of weird in the second part. They also, if we want to get into the gripes of the second half here, like they literally gave the epic comeback that he had in the last 2.5, 48 months, whatever you want to call it, 2.5 years. They gave it like 8 minutes of screen time versus the full DUI video, like the whole 13 minutes of police camera footage. Like they showed every single second of that. And then they showed the tour championship and they show him and Rory walking down 18 for like 30 seconds and like don't do any buildup of that story of his path back to there, like the steps along the way and in his golf, like they don't talk about the British Open he almost won, or like even give any context to that tournament in general. They just literally show him walking down the 18th hole with all the people, which again, I think that's just subject more to it being crammed in 2 episodes versus them like completely whiffing on it. But that was kind of weird for me. Like the amount of the way they weighted the time, I guess they had a limited window and they put an hour of the hour and a half second part all around the scandal. And like, I guess kind of that's the way the media handled it too. Like they said, like the New York Times had more posts about Tiger's scandal than 9/11, like crazy shit like that. But like, I don't know, like the scandal, we all know what happened. Like we've all read that story before. Like obviously talk to it, get the interviews in there to show the different perspectives from the people that were actually there, whether it's Stevie, Rachel, whoever else they got there. But they just showed nonstop footage of him walking in and out of a Vegas club. Like, I don't know, like I didn't do anything for me of him walking. Like I'd rather listen to the interview people than just see him walking out of a club, but like not actually show anything because it's just him walking in, the paparazzi flashing shit in his face, and then he gets back in the car.
Yeah, I agree too. I thought the golf aspect, and I think a big piece of the film was it wasn't really a golf film, and I think
You
a
can
lot
tell
of
they
people.
definitely try to make it more for the general audience, which I kind of appreciate because it brings more people in to get an understanding of him and not just know him for the scandal headlines he had 10 years ago. So I kind of appreciate that. They definitely did take a less golf forward approach, or however you want to say that.
Yeah, but I do agree. I think, right, like golf is who Tiger Woods is, and without golf, this story doesn't exist. And him as a person and as a prominent human being, don't exist unless golf is a piece of it. So I think that was definitely a little bit of a miss. I wish they would have shown a little bit of golf kind of along the way instead of kind of like just throwing it randomly in there. I think when you kind of talk about his upbringing, like it would have been nice maybe to see a few more videos of him on the golf course interacting with Earl. Like there was a couple good ones, but they were just so fucking random. Like it didn't add anything for me. Like when you said, like when you talked about, you know, Earl doing like being in the RV with like these girls that that he was teaching, like they would be like, oh, Tiger was on the golf course or something like that. Like that's a great time to like transition or do something where it's like Earl and Tiger like are on that same golf course, or like right by or like grinding on the range, and then like you kind of fade into the RV. Like there was opportunities to bring golf into the story, which at the end of the day, golf is kind of the vessel for Tiger Woods' story. Like along the way, he has a very intriguing life, and a lot of very ridiculous and interesting things have happened to him along the way. But I think they didn't use the most prominent piece of his life to kind of move his story along. So I would have liked to see a little bit more. I would have liked to see a little bit more in kind of the mid 2000s when they're really kind of building him up and creating this person and kind of like this fake facade and like this like kind of shell of a human being, and talk about like how great his golf was and really build him up. And then if you're going to tear him down, which I don't wish anyone to tear down Tiger Woods, because he's meant a lot to me in my life and kind of my golfing career, because I've idolized him from a playing golf perspective. But if you're going to do that, like use golf against him in some capacity, build him up and then tear him down, and then talk about how golf went from being the most important piece of his life and the only thing he really cared about to it pretty much being scrapped and him having to deal with all these things that he put on the back burner because he played golf. Like let's create some, and I use the word juxtaposition again here, but like I think there's an opportunity for that. So I think that was one of my gripes to the whole thing. A lot of golf shots were out of order, which I think kind of
the highlight of that is the Augusta one where Stevie tells the story, which is actually a pretty cool story, like a little candid, like
on 13
inside the ropes. Yeah. Phil hits a driver, which also Phil's hitting a slice driver. So obviously when Tiger hits a rope hook, it's going to go past him. I understand it was a 3-wood past the driver, but he gives the comment to Phil, like, oh, I usually hit it further than this. And then Steve's like, oh yeah, you could tell that like rattled Phil. And they shoot back. He's on the 10th green again. It's like, what are you? it's not like we're at some random tournament in Florida that, you know, it's not the biggest thing in the world and people don't remember the golf course hole by hole. People remember Augusta hole by hole. If you show 13, you can't go back to show 10. That's just, it's
They
just so blatantly
they,
obvious. It's like if
they
you had
should.
anybody that knows golf review that, they would have been like, dude, pick a different shot that Phil hit on the back nine that wasn't that good. Because it's not even like they did a quick flash to it, showed him hit like a miss like a short putt and then moved. It's not like they showed him have a historic meltdown for 3 holes in a row. They showed him miss one short putt and then they bounce off of it. But they picked
I,
a short putt on a hole that didn't make sense. It's
I
like
think I think it was
such a
4.
layup. Like
I think it was 3 or something. He like
yeah,
missed the putt on 3, and then right, and they're talking about the turning point being the 13th hole,
yeah,
and then they go back and Tiger hits a laser on 11. Like
yeah,
like maybe Phil felt a little threatened 2 holes earlier,
yeah,
and like you could have built that in some capacity where it was like building, 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 and then Tiger hit this 3-wood, and then it was
yeah.
like it was over,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like
Make that the
knew at
kill
that
shot
point.
or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All across the board with the golf, like you said, it felt random at times. The timing, like they didn't really mesh it in with his life enough. They kind of just been like, oh, by the way, the reason he has all this money is going on these trips and stuff is because, oh yeah, he's doing this on the golf course. It wasn't like, you know, the only time they really made emphasis on the timeline with golf was after the scandal, how quickly he came back and played in the Masters in April. That was really the only time I feel like they hammered like life to golf and like really made that blend. Other than that, it was like really all over the place, like golf, 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 life, and but like not in the consistent flow of the way the timeline went. It was like a ton of golf talk, and then let's go back. By the way, here's all this life stuff too. Like they could have blended it so much better. I feel like not I'm not saying they need to put more golf in it, maybe just because like as like they said they're trying to make it more general, but like have it flow a little more. And like you said, I think if they could have really built him up because he was so freaking good from 2000 to 2007 or 8 even, I guess you can extend it to build him up. I mean, they really did do a good job with the '08 US Open, but that story's been told a million times, like we said, like nothing new. But they showed like the '07 PGA at Erin Hills or Southern Hills. Like it's one of the most random majors Tiger's ever won. Like I don't know if you asked me to name all 14 or 15 that he has right now, I'd probably forget that one when I'm going down the list, you know? So it's like that why out of all the ones you show that one and like why not build it up like it really was? Um just so like you said, then you really get into how big of a fall it was when he had his scandal and then the subsequent back problems and DUI and all that stuff. I just it was close. It wasn't like I said, like we said at the beginning of this. It's worth the watch. It was really good to get some more insight from those interviews that they had and get a little bit more on the Earl relationship and kind of show that and get some other people's perspective on that relationship that seemed to be pretty close to the family and whatnot. But it was off in some ways. I was like sitting on my couch, like, where are we at? Where are we now? Like, what? Like, why did we just jump back 3 holes ago? And like stuff like that with whether it was golf or just tying it all together. There was definitely some stuff that was like, nah. But overall, I think it's worth watching. And if you haven't read the book, it's worth reading the book as well. Because like we said, Tiger Woods is quite the individual. So
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely worth a watch, and one of those things where if you're remotely interested in golf, then sit down and take 2 hours um, out of your day or out of your night to do it. Um, I think too another one, and not to dig in too much to this documentary because I'm not a filmmaker,
yeah.
and I would never want to try to create a Tiger Woods documentary without him involved.
Hmm.
I think that's another aspect of it, right? Like,
And I'm sure the second the people making this reached out to Tiger or his team or whoever was like, yeah, no chance, buddy. Like,
yeah,
so I guess you can't hold them under too much of a fire here, which we're just really trying to review the doc here. We're not trying to really crucify them too much here, but because like you said, we're not filmmakers by any means. And I just think they did really well with what they had, I think is really the point here, right? Like you're not going to get Tiger to sit down and tell you the story. Not now. I don't think ever, to be honest, unless he writes it himself and sits down and does that, which I don't think he's ever going to want to do. I don't know if he wants to bring up that stuff for his family to, his kids when they're say he writes the book in 20 years and Charlie's 30 years old and has a career, has a life, has a family of his own. does he really want to start getting asked about when he was 2 years old and his dad had an affair again? Like, probably not. So I think he's going to pass and just kind of leave it for what it is, that what's already out there and stuff like that, and kind of really just focus on moving forward with it. I think Tiger, throughout it, they talk all about how through his SEAL training he did, and his upbringing with Earl and all this stuff, like he's the best in the world that meant like compartmentalizing. What's the word? I don't know. Like just really just separating stuff and focusing on one thing and putting whatever the other noise is, completely blacking that shit out, which you could see he did on the golf course his whole career. And that's what made him as good as he was on the golf course, is this mental toughness. But to be able to do that, he also did it in real life, clearly. But yeah, I think the way that mindset is, I don't think he's going to want to go back and dig up all this shit. I think he's going to just keep the momentum going with the comeback he's had. And, it seems like from all we can tell, he's on good terms with his kids. And Elam was at the PNC watching Charlie and, stuff like that, that I think he's worked so hard. And, you know, obviously the scandal, like he was a bad human for however many years that shit was going on. But he had quite literally the most public like humiliation and like it seemed like everybody took a shot at him, right? Like that Billy Payne clip they showed at Augusta was fucking insane. I was like, Brian Gumble did a pretty good job of being like, who the fuck are you? But like, I was on my couch being like, who the fuck are you? Like, who, like, you don't just like, it's very wild to see, and I mean, not to like just slander other people because of that, but like, they're going to do something like that for Angel Cabrera this year because he's won at Augusta too before. Are they going to publicly roast him at the opening, you know, whatever you like press conferences this year? Like, probably not. It's like that was a low blow. Like, Tiger was handling it as best he could. He had a public apology that aired on ESPN, ABC, NBC, CBS, where he literally stood in front of his mother, his I don't know if they were still a wife or if they're already divorced at this point. Like everybody who possibly could have been affected by his actions, he stood in front of a room and read a public ass apology that was broadcasted across the world. And like in all of it, the whole time he's like, I fucked up. Like he owned it, like what more can you ask from the guy? Like I think that was his last he wanted to talk about it publicly. And the rest of it, he's probably been putting in a lot of conversations, a lot of work with his ex-wife, his kids, his mom, whoever else in his camp that was negatively impacted by that. Like I think he'll do the work behind the scenes, but publicly you can't ask for much more than that because he did that. And then the public still kept digging and digging and digging. And I think that burned that bridge forever. He's never going to write about this again. I don't think, never going to talk about it again publicly. I think he's done talking about it because he's doing the work with the people he needs to do the work with, and fuck everybody else at this point because you guys absolutely sewered him when he really didn't have to because he sewered himself. Once he get out, he fell on it. Like he did what he could do. He's obviously not proud of it. Nobody's proud of stuff like that, but I don't know. I think we're never gonna get his tell all. I think it's just he's done with the public from that stuff, and I hope he just keeps enjoying. And like we alluded to earlier, the PNC with Charlie, he seems to really be enjoying golf again from a personal standpoint, as well as watching his kid grow up and find some fun with the competitiveness of it. I hope he just kind of hangs on to more of that stuff. And as much as I'd love to get his side of the story, I just don't think it's ever gonna come. And I think we as a consumer took that away from ourselves with the way we treated him throughout his first 20 years of being in the public spotlight. We didn't give him a chance to trust us or, or want to give us information because everything we gave us, we threw right back in his face the second he fucked up. So I think we're not going to get anything out of him anymore when it comes to that stuff. He'll talk golf all day long and probably be heavily involved in, anything Charlie does if he takes it that seriously or whatever it may be. And, he loves the sports in general. We'll see him at, if we ever get crowds back at sporting events events, I guess we'll see him at sporting events, stuff like that. But I don't think he's ever going to give us any more insight to his personal life than we've already taken from him. And that's just unfortunate, but I think that's just where it's going to be.
Yeah, no, I want to just kind of reiterate something that you said. I think overall kind of what you're getting at, like, and you said the word, it's compartmentalized. Like he is just a professional multi-personality, like someone who can compartmentalize his entire life for good or for bad. Like it's made him very successful on the golf course because he's able to kind of block out something bad that's happened and really move forward and just have this extreme level of confidence. It's also put him in a situation where he could compartmentalize and find some sort of value and like somehow inside tell himself that it was okay to, go and have these extramarital affairs because he was like protecting his wife and kind of I think he had just started to, I think his daughter had been born at that point. And Charlie had just been born as well. So like compartmentalize the idea of like, I am like killing them in one aspect, but I'm also like protecting them in the other. And that's not like a healthy way to compartmentalize,
Right.
but it was the way that he dealt with the situation
Yeah, he
itself.
chose to lay his burdens on that like whoever Rachel was versus talking to Elon about it because I mean, I guess we'll never know his actual reasons, but like you said, he in his mind was able to be like, listen, I've given them this life. I don't want to burden them with whatever the fuck he was going through personally, and found that comfort or solace or whatever the word is, where like his haven was with Rachel and whoever the other girl. There's other girls too, obviously, but clearly Rachel was special to him a little bit more. But yeah, it's like we said at the beginning, like the Tiger Woods story is quite the story of a human, a golfer, all this stuff. And this documentary, although, we're picking at it here and there's definitely some stuff we would have liked to see better. But if you're somebody who's not overly familiar with the Tiger Woods story, there's a lot of information in here that will be incredibly interesting and, provide some context to the stuff that Tiger went through. Whether he did to himself or, the DUIs and stuff like that. Like it really lays out like it takes you deeper than the golf to kind of get an understanding of who he is because on the golf course he doesn't show you anything, right? Like he doesn't show his competitors anything. Like there's that clip from 2019 Masters that somebody interviewed Tony Finau after, who played with Tiger in the final round, and on like the fifth hole, they're waiting on the tee box there, and Tony's like, "How's the kids going? Like, how's the kids, Tiger? Like, how things going back home, whatever." And Tiger looked at him, just straight face, goes, "Good," and that was it. Like that's the compartmentalizing feature that he has, and what's made him so good at golf. Like that's just who he is as a person, and it's incredible. I don't know, it's just crazy.
Yeah, no, and it just kind of comes back to the idea that like, yeah, he's been through all this stuff in his life, and now he's kind of at a point where I think he's probably a little more at peace with everything that's going on, at least from what we can see.
Mm-hmm.
But he's able to take a step back from here and say, I don't really give two fucks what the media
Yeah.
or what you guys have to say. Like things are going well,
Yeah.
at least on my end with my family and everything that's happening right now. So I can compartmentalize in that sense and
Yeah.
be okay with it and move on with my life no matter what the other people have to say. So I think it's just a case of Tiger Woods being um, an interesting human being that has shown us so many different personalities, um, and we've watched him do it since he was 2 years old. Um, and I don't know if we're ever going to see another situation where we watch someone grow up from the time they're 2 years old doing the action, the sport, whatever the case may be, and that becomes their life.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're ever going to see it. I don't know if we're ever going to be in a situation where it's documented the way that Tiger Woods' life is documented. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's ridiculous for me to think about, is the fact that
Yeah.
like, how the hell did they have this
All this
footage?
footage, right? All this footage, this like quote unquote paper trail, like all of this stuff. Like that's the thing. Like he's operated under the assumption that everybody's watching everything I do from age 6. Like that's just, you can't exist like that. It's crazy. I guess like to kind of wrap up here, my favorite clip of the documentary, just to kind of get back on a positive side here, was when Army Katayan is in there and they're going over the 2019 Masters now, and he's like, you hear all these players when Tiger made his comeback of how they would love to be in contention with Tiger coming down the end of the Masters or, any kind of major and see what that was like when he was at his prime and all that stuff. And then it flashes to the 12th tee at Augusta and he just goes, the fuck you do. Because, and then they proceeded to show Tony Finau, Francesco Molinari, Brooks Koepka, all these guys dump one in the water on 12 and Tiger make a par. And that it plays to Tiger's mental strength and all that stuff and how he wins. But it was just like, that was my favorite clip of like, all right, you just shit on the guy and like really showed his darkest moments really as a person for about 30 minutes. And then they finally go back to, by the way, he's a fucking killer on the golf course and he's like the best to ever do it with like the way he just like built it up. You could tell he wanted to deliver that one so hard, like the fuck you do. And he like really nailed it. I loved that part of it. And I guess one last thing on the opposite side of that, the National Enquirer guy they had on there, fuck you, dude. That guy was a loser. With his fucking bow tie all fucked up and his goofy glasses and everything, like giggling and all this shit as he's talking about this stuff. He's like, stop acting like a hero, dude. You just stalked a guy who was like cheating on his wife for 3 years. Like, don't act like you were all high and mighty. Like, he just, I don't know. I'm obviously a little bit biased because like I love Tiger, so like fuck him anyways. But like, they couldn't have picked a douchier guy to be the former National Enquirer guy that's had all these dirty scoops on Tiger. Like you picture a TMZ reporter or whatever, and you picture like a scumbag like Sketchball. They couldn't have painted that picture better by having fucking bow tie loser face show up on the screen. I was like, oh, before they even put what he was, like, who the fuck is this guy? But
Yeah, no, I am not going to argue with those 2 points. I agree. I thought the comment, like, I think also too, Tiger Woods is he plays a different role now. Like guys like Justin Thomas and Ricky Fowler and even Rory, like they look up to him as the person that they looked up to as their golf idol their entire life, and have said a lot of times, like, my goal is to be battling with Tiger on the back nine at the Masters or of Sunday of a major championship. But it's like, fuck you do. Like, you say you want that, but like we know, like when push comes to shove, like the guy is the greatest to ever do it. And he's been through a lot. And but yeah, agree completely. And I don't think we need to harp on the National Enquirer guy. Definitely a loser. If you didn't see the documentary, definitely worth the look just to see that guy too, because I think he's he's just like, when I think of a ridiculous human being who I would never want to cross paths with, and if I did, I would just avoid him like the plague. That's the guy I think about. So
he's the guy when he offers you a beer at the bar, you're like, no, nah, I don't think so. Like he like buys around for everybody, is everybody's friend. You're like, yeah, something's off about you. I'm good, thanks. Like, like he just gives off those vibes of like scummy, sketchy, whatever it is.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. But Mr. Fontaine, it's been a blast. I think these deep dives are something that we want to do a little bit more of. Tiger's a great place to start, just because I know we have a lot of ammo and firepower to talk about before we even get into the documentary. But looking forward to doing some more of this, whether it be about other guys on tour or things outside of golf as well. I think just an opportunity,
whatever happens,
Yeah, agreed. I think just kind of providing a little perspective to the listeners on where we come from. I think we'll find some parallel ground, and we'll also find some areas where we think in a different direction than some of our listeners as well. And I think we're in a great situation for, and an opportunity to interact with people. So send us comments if you feel like, we're completely off base here with what we're talking about, or you love what we're talking about. We want to hear both. I think it's just going to make us better listeners and debaters and consumers of content like this. So be sure to just comment and send us any sort of gripe or thing that you liked about it, and happy to chat more with you guys. So appreciate you jumping on here, Mr. Fontaine.
Absolutely.
All right, take it easy. God bless Tiger Woods.
God bless.